Hello! The number one question I get is, where do I start with Sanatana Dharma? What books do I read? Everyone's telling me something different. I don't know where to start. There's so much information online. How do I begin? And so today I want to provide a list of books that you can read in order so that you don't get confused and that you have the proper historical context going into reading some of the more complex books, such as the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and so on. You know, there's a reason why we have what we have, the text that we have, and it's important to honor that process and honor the journey of learning. So where you're going to begin, you're going to start with your 18 Puranas. I have provided in the description below a link to where I found the 18 Puranas. You can find pretty much everything on archive.org. I'm gonna link the video that I did with my mom and my family friend Madhu, where we go into this topic in detail, so you can get some more context there. And then also check out the rewritten documentary that has a lot of information about why it's important to read about history. And so what you're going to do is you're going to start off with your 18 Puranas. You're going to learn about the history of the world. The Puranas, how it qualifies as a Purana is if it talks about the beginning of the world. And so a Purana has all of the information since the day that the world began. The first one you're going to read is Brahma Purana. And Brahma Purana talks about, again, the beginning of the world. And then it goes into Padma Purana, Vishnu Purana, and so on. I think Vishnu Purana is one of the longest, or maybe it's Skanda Purana. Either way, Vishnu Purana is so beautiful. I'm currently on the part where there's the incarnation of Krishna. So that's been extremely exciting to read about. And so, yeah, it gives you a lot of information. There are lots of names to remember. There's a lot of historical context there. It sort of gives you an understanding of how even the North Star was created, Dhruv. It's packed full of information. So take your time with it. A lot of people will wave off the Puranas and the Ithihas, which we'll talk about next, as just mere storytelling. And it's really important to give credit and to understand why Bhagavan tells us to read these things, because, it brings us a foundational knowledge before we get into more of the complicated, more nuanced, more specific material. So definitely, take your time with the 18 Puranas. It teaches us as history, it teaches us Dharma, and there's a lot of different lessons sprinkled throughout. So the next set of books you're going to read are the Ithihas, and it's as it sounds. It happened, Ithihas. So Ramayana and Mahabharata. Everyone knows Ramayana and Mahabharata, but I wanted to say, a lot of people, Hindus included, call this as mythology, and they just kind of wave it off, like I said, as storytelling. And the Ithihas is how it sounds, right? It happened. So I think it's important to look at these historical contexts for us to gain lessons from it. From Ramayana, I'm intending to make this video pretty quick, but a quick couple sentences on Ramayana. What can be said about Ramayana, right? Lord Rama taught us how to live the most dharmic life. He taught us, he was the pinnacle of good, right? And he was battling someone who was the pinnacle of evil, Ravana. And he teaches us forgiveness. He teaches us pure love. He teaches us understanding. There's just so much that can be said about Lord Rama, and from that came, right, Hanuman and Sundaragandam, and there's so many different subsects of what we can understand about Ramayana. But the biggest thing is, for me, that I gathered is how to live a good life, how to uphold Dharma, how to be a good child, how to be a good wife from Sita, and all the sacrifices that are potentially necessary for you to do good for the world. In the Mahabharata, we learned a lot about greed. We learned a lot about suffering. We learned how, the world turned from the Treta Yugam to the Dwapara Yugam. I made a video a while ago talking about the trickling down effect of good and evil between Satya Yugam to the Kali Yugam. So in the Satya Yugam, good and evil were separated by planes, and good was residing on one plane, evil was residing on another plane. In the Treta Yuga, good and evil are separated by worlds. So Ravana is sitting on one side of the world, Ram is sitting on one side of the world. In the Dwapara Yuga, good and evil is separated between families, right? We see the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And then, from that, so many different things happened, right? The Kauravas and Pandavas were fighting, and the Mahabharata is really all about, conquering that adharma. that occurred, and with the disrobing of Draupadi sort of being the onset of the Kurukshetra, that really shows us how disrespectful people were towards women, and how that kind of had a trickle down effect into the Kali Yugam, where we are now. So again, in Dwapara Yugam, good and evil separated by family. In the Kali Yugam, where we are right now, good and evil is residing within us. And so you can really see how good and evil sort of went from, planes to then self. And it's just this really beautiful illustration. And that, again, is evident in the Puranas, and you can also see that in the differences between Ramayana to Mahabharata. So that is why it's really important to understand it. It's very important to understand history. I'm going to link a video that I did with my mom and with our family friend Madhu. They go into this pretty deeply on that video, so I will link that. And then I also have a documentary out called Rewritten, and that is supposed to show how history plays a major role in our lives and why it's important to look at history and to teach our children of the future good history and not to perpetuate hate. And what happens when you do perpetuate hate? Right? I think we can see that evidenced in our world today. People were quite angry with me with the TikTok video that I posted a couple days ago. So I think it's very important to teach our future children good history. It's important to not perpetuate hatred, and it's important to understand history, just so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. History does tend to repeat itself, so let's not be a part of the problem. After that, you're going to read Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam it's a Purana, but it's very relevant to today. So it starts off with Parikshit Maharaja, who is Arjuna's grandson, and he was the first king of the Kali Yugam. He's actually within that sort of transition period between the Dwapara Yugam and the Kali Yugam. In that transition period, that's when Parikshit Maharaja was king, and so it starts there. And so it gives us, a depiction of what happens in the Kali Yugam, what to expect. And I can do a whole video on that. I haven't read it completely. It's still sitting over there, if you can see it on my shelf. And so that is the most important book that we can read, the most important Purana that we can read. So while you read your 18 Puranas, you read your Ithihas, then you go back to Srimad Bhagavatam. And then you want to read your Bhagavad Gita. So you have your historical context of the 18 Puranas, you have your context of the Mahabharata, and then you start to get into the conversation between Arjuna and Sri Krishna. Bhagavad Gita itself is a conversation between Arjuna and Sri Krishna over the span of 18 days, which is the span of the Kurukshetra. And in that conversation, we can learn a lot about how to deal with our world, right? The timing of all of this is so beautiful, right? Think about it. Think about when these books came into play. The Bhagavad Gita is given to us during the time of the Kurukshetra, right? And when does the Kurukshetra happen? A little bit before the Kali Yugam, right? Near the ending of the Dwapara Yugam. And then there's that transition period between Dwapara Yugam and Kali Yugam, and then the Kali Yugam starts. So this is one of the most important books that we can read. This, along with Srimad Bhagavatam, these two are going to be the keys on how we can get through this Kali Yugam, right? Let's think about, rationally, what is it that Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna? He's telling him how to live without suffering. If we're going to take a really grand scale, right? He talks about, you are not your body, you are your Atma. Do your duty, do your dharma, right? Learn about your family's culture. Learn about who are you? Learn about who you are, right? Understand who you are. Do things not for you, but for Bhagavan. Do everything for Bhagavan. Surrender the results to the Bhagavan. Surrender the good things, the bad things, everything to Bhagavan. Give up all of your suffering, because you are not you. You are not your body. You're not who you think you are. You are your soul. And so that's why it's so beautiful to read the Bhagavad Gita. But for that, we need to graduate into it, right? We need to learn everything that we learned above, and then we are ready for the Bhagavad Gita. One of the things that I recommend is to get a guru. I know I'm making it sound very easy, but pray and ask God for a guru. Ask him, please give me a guru so that I can study the Bhagavad Gita. And keep asking and keep praying, and he will bring you one. right? None of this is possible. None of this information can be accessed unless you pray. You have to pray, you have to ask, you have to be very humble when going to God and saying, I want to learn all of this. And so continuously pray, continuously be curious, and you will get the answers that you're looking for. As a reminder for the Bhagavad Gita, every struggle that we could see here in the Kali Yuga is addressed in Q&A form, where Arjuna is telling Krishna that he does not want to fight, and Krishna is reminding him of his duty as a Kshatriya. As the chapters progress, we get into many different topics. For example, what is the Atma? How does karma work? What do our Shastras say? And many other day-to-day issues that we encounter. However, do not look for your solutions to your problems. Rather, follow the teachings that Krishna prescribes and watch your problems disappear. At the end of the day, desire is the root of rebirth, therefore, our suffering. And so it's important to look at the Bhagavad Gita for what it is, right? The Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, and we are represented by Arjuna, right? Please don't identify with Krishna. Please identify with Arjuna. Arjuna is our spokesperson for all of our problems. And so think about it from that perspective and make sure that you are humbly asking God the same questions so that when you actually go ahead and learn what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us, we'll be able to relate it back to our circumstances. But again, don't flip the book and say, hey, where can I find a solution to my problem? No, rather follow what Krishna is telling us to do. For example, wake up in the morning, pray to God, take a shower, cook food, then, pray again, and just like sort of keeping God in mind all the time. That's when we can start to reap the benefits of the Bhagavad Gita and start to actually relinquish ourselves really, and live with less suffering. The next major thing to read are the Upanishads. So the Upanishads are, the Vedanta. So that's the end of the Vedas. There are about 200 plus total. 108 of them are well known. And then there are 10 Mukhya Upanishads or principal Upanishads. And they're called Mukhya Upanishads because Shankaracharya has written commentary for them, or it's basically called Bhashyam. So the Upanishads are again at the end of the Vedas, and you're going to read that after you read the Bhagavad Gita. The last text is Brahma Sutra, also written by Veda Vyasar, and it is a compressed version of the Upanishads. It's in condensed form. So you're going to read this after you read the Upanishads because, you really can't understand Brahma Sutra without reading the Upanishads. But they say, the Brahma Sutra, the reason why they gave like a condensed version of the Upanishads is because you can't necessarily read the whole thing. You can't necessarily read all of the Upanishads, so they gave us a condensed version. And the word sutra itself means compressed. So it's interesting. Like the Brahma Sutra itself, you can't understand it unless you have the background of Upanishads. But then the Brahma Sutra itself is supposed to be a condensed version of the Upanishads. So do what you can. Read the Brahma Sutra for sure after you have the background knowledge of the Upanishads, and then that way you can understand like discussion points, because think about like a SparkNotes version of like a Shakespeare book, right? You have like the Shakespeare book, like if you remember in high school where we got like those, I have them right there, I don't remember what they're called, Folger's copy, like the Folger's library versions. You have your Folger's library version of Shakespeare, how he has like one word, and then there's like, we have to talk about it in English class, and we start to learn about that one word, and we expand on it and discuss it. That's similar to how the Brahma Sutra is to the Upanishads. So the Brahma Sutra is like a few words, right? Condensing the Upanishads, and it's filled with discussion. And so we can only really understand the one word when we actually look into the discussion points. So, as we go deeper and deeper into these books, we understand how vast they are. And so if you want to read all of this in your lifetime, I suggest start now and get on with the Puranas and then go in that order. So after you read the Brahma Sutra, it's recommended that you read the Bhagavad Gita again. And I love the idea of reading the Bhagavad Gita again because I think it's like, it proves that, you know, Bhagavad Gita is not a book where you just open and close it and finish it and say, I finished the Bhagavad Gita. I think this structure really helps us understand how evolved this journey is, and how it's important to continuously learn. I really ran through those super quick. Let me know if you have questions. Again, I will put the link to the Puranas down below. I'll put the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam book I have, the version of the Bhagavad Gita book I have. But again, please pray to God, ask for a guru, and I wish you luck on this journey of learning. It's exciting that you want to learn. You know, when I first started, I was really intimidated by how to start, and my parents were gracious enough to break it down for me, and they provided me with countless amount of resources, which I honestly feel really bad that not everybody gets to have the resources that I get to have. So that's what my effort here on YouTube is going to be, you know, sharing the things that I learn and passing it along to you so that I can kind of give back, because I really do feel very privileged having the parents that I have. So anyway, good luck and get to it. Bye.